The taste of Mesopotamia lingers faintly on your tongue. Not the grit of stone-ground bread or the bite of tamarisk bark, but the gentler notes, mint water, honey salve, the smoky afterglow of clove and story. Your jaw relaxes, your breath slows, and the city with all its bustling, scribbling, chewing, chanting, fish-slinging charm fades into hush. You don't need to understand it all. Not tonight. Just drift with it. Let the incense curl around your thoughts. Let the reed music echo somewhere soft behind your eyes. You are clean. You are cared for. You are part of something very, very old. Sleep now. Dream slow. Hey guys, tonight we're going to do something deeply boring in the most delightful way. You're going to wake up in ancient Mesopotamia, specifically in the Sumerian city of Ur, where the streets are dusty, the donkeys are loud, and the dental hygiene. Well, let's just say you probably won't survive this without a sore jaw and a few missing molars. You're not a king or a priest. You're just you. A normal person in a very abnormal world, where people write with reeds, pay taxes in goats, and brush their teeth with twigs. Yes, twigs. And tonight we're going to walk through a day in your ancient sandals, starting from the moment your eyelids flutter open on a rooftop in a city of mud brick and moonlight. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment with your location and local time. I love knowing where and when you're listening. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake before the sun finishes its climb. That strange yellow glow hasn't yet spilled over the rooftops, but the city is already murmuring. Donkeys bray. A woman calls to her neighbor in a gravelly morning voice. Somewhere nearby, a pot clangs against stone, and you roll over on your woven reed mat, staring up at the pink sky. You're on your rooftop bed. Everyone sleeps up here this time of year. It's too hot downstairs, where the walls sweat at night and the clay oven holds on to yesterday's heat like a cranky cat. The breeze tickles your feet as you sit up, rubbing your eyes and knocking a bit of dried mud out of your hair. The city of Ur stretches below you, zigzagging alleys, low-slung homes, and the great ziggurat like a layered cake in the center of it all. Smoke spirals from cooking fires. Someone's playing a reed flute off-key. It's a beautiful dusty mess. You head down the stairs to start the day, feet slapping gently on sun-warmed stone. You pass your cousin, who is already grinding barley by hand and looking absolutely thrilled about it. She grunts a half-greeting without pausing her rhythmic scraping. Your first stop isn't food, it's the riverbank. You walk the short distance to the Euphrates, dodging a particularly large pile of donkey leavings and a man selling fish that may or may not still be alive. The air smells like water and warm clay, with a hint of fermented dates. You crouch by the bank next to a few other early risers and begin your morning ritual. Out of a pouch on your belt, you pull your toothbrush, or rather your twig. It's not just any twig, it's a carefully chosen one, probably from the Salvadora persica tree if you're fancy, or maybe just whatever woody plant you could snap off yesterday. You chew one end until it frays into a sort of primitive bristle, and then with the sleepy determination of someone who doesn't want their breath to smell like dried lentils, you begin scrubbing. The twig is fibrous and a little bitter. It smells vaguely of sap and earth. The texture's not half bad, though, somewhere between a soft scrub brush and a tree whispering secrets to your teeth. As you work, you watch another man rinse his own chewed stick in the river, then spit dramatically as though his mouth offended the gods. Nearby, a boy dips his twig and promptly loses it to the current. He watches it float away with the melancholy of someone who knows there's now an awkward conversation waiting at home. You smile despite yourself. The chewing stick has been a part of life here for generations, and while archaeologists have found little written instruction on their use, We know from burial sites that these people took surprising care with their teeth. Maybe not by our standards, but considering they lived in an era without toothpaste, toothbrushes, or dental insurance, they did all right. Historians still argue whether the chewing sticks were used once and discarded or kept until they resembled tiny haunted mops. But you've been using yours for 3 days, and it still has enough bite left in it. You rinse your mouth not so much with clean water because, let's face it, clean is a modern fantasy, but with the same muddy river water everyone else is using. It tastes a bit like frog opinions and sand, but it does the job. Next to you, an old woman hawks up something dramatic and lets it fly into the reeds. She then nods at you approvingly as if to say, "Nice technique." And just like that, your teeth are, well, not clean exactly, but cleaner than they were when you woke up. They feel slightly less fuzzy. Your breath may still carry undertones of dried onion and existential regret, but no one's expecting mint here. You stand stretching your back. The sun has finally peeked over the rooftops, and the first real heat of the day is beginning to rise. Your cousin will expect you to help with the baking. There are bricks to carry, barley to haul, goats to be herded away from the laundry line. But for now, you've done your duty to your mouth. And in ancient Mesopotamia, that's something worth smiling about, even if you're missing a few teeth when you do it. You shuffle away from the river, your teeth still tingling from their twig-brushing encounter. The dirt path leading home is already heating up beneath your soles, and the dust puffs with every step like it's exhaling complaints. You pass 2 children chasing a rooster that clearly has no intention of being caught today. It screeches indignantly as it sprints past you, leaving behind a feather and a moral lesson about underestimating poultry. As you make your way through the neighborhood, you notice others beginning their own morning rituals. A potter is turning her wheel slowly, letting the clay slump lazily between her fingers. A baker's apprentice swats at flies with a fan made of woven reeds, while sneaking small pieces of date dough into his mouth when he thinks no one's looking. But you've got teeth to think about. Back at your home, a modest single-story setup with a courtyard and a fig tree stubbornly refusing to grow, you sit cross-legged in the corner of the shaded patio. This is your second round of oral maintenance, and it's far less glamorous. You pull out a hardened lump of tree resin wrapped in a scrap of cloth. It's sticky, pungent, and tastes like a tree's bad attitude. Still, this is how you freshen up for the day. You pop a small piece into your mouth and begin chewing. The resin softens just slightly with your body heat, giving off a bitter, piney taste with earthy undertones. It's not sweet, it's not fun, but your ancestors believed it helped keep the mouth-clean gums healthy, and perhaps most importantly, your breath slightly less like fermented lentils and regret. There's a light creak behind you. Your neighbor Tamra settles on the opposite bench, holding her own lump of resin. She's a clay merchant with a smile so wide you can see where one molar is trying to escape sideways. "Morning," she mutters, chewing slowly. "Morning," you reply, around a mouthful of resin. And then you sit in a comfortable silence, occasionally clicking your teeth together like 2 horses sharing secrets. The air smells of wood smoke and cumin. A fly investigates your knee and is swatted away with minimal ceremony. Tamra breaks the silence. "Saw your cousin at the well. Told her your breath smells like boiled goat." You raise an eyebrow. "Better than yours. Yours smells like someone set fire to old sandals." You both laugh, a soft, dry chuckle. In this part of the city, insults are love letters. And if your neighbors aren't commenting on your halitosis, do they even care? Historically speaking, tree resin wasn't just an early chewing gum. It doubled as an antiseptic. Fragments of it have been found in archaeological sites across Mesopotamia, often mixed with herbs or even charred animal bones. The idea was simple. If it sticks to your teeth, maybe it pulls the bad stuff out with it. Historians still argue whether this resin chewing was ritualistic, medicinal, or just something to do when your neighbor's gossip got boring. Either way, it passed the time and kept your jaw busy. Tamra spits into a clay bowl. You hear about Kidu, she says. You shake your head. His wife says his breath's so bad the cat left. You blink. They don't even have a cat. Exactly, Tamra says, nodding with smug satisfaction. The resin starts to dry out in your mouth. You chew more slowly now, savoring the rough edges, and that peculiar way it makes your tongue feel like it's coated in bark. There's a tiny twig embedded in this piece, probably a bit of the tree it was scraped from, and you pick it out with your fingernail, flicking it to the ground where it joins the dust, a beetle, and a sun-dried olive pit. Over in the alley, a few merchants are beginning to unpack their carts. Linen goat cheese, dried fish that smells like it died twice. You spot one man setting up what you know will become the loudest stall in the district. He sells perfumes, oils, and gossip in equal measure. You stretch again. The resin, now rubbery and tasteless, has done its duty. You spit it into a compost pit where it will no doubt confuse some archaeologist in 5,000 years. Chewing gum, they'll say, but with attitude. One last stretch, and you begin your slow walk to the shared courtyard. The day awaits brick baking, barley grinding, and maybe a visit to the temple if you're feeling spiritually inclined or just need an excuse to stand in the shade. As you walk, your mind drifts. How did people even figure this stuff out? Chewing resin, brushing with twigs. Did someone one day just gnaw on a stick and go, "Yep, this is peak hygiene"? Maybe there was a visionary long forgotten who one day watched a goat chew a tree and thought, "Me too." Historians don't know. They still argue whether these practices were passed down deliberately or simply evolved out of habit and necessity. The written records are sparse, and the ones that do exist tend to focus more on taxes and floods than oral hygiene routines. But one thing's certain, nobody likes bad breath no matter the century. And here in ancient Mesopotamia, between the twigs and the resin and the sass, people found ways to deal with it. You pause as you pass a woman singing to her baby, tapping out a lullaby rhythm on the side of a clay water jar. It's oddly calming. You hum along for a moment before slipping into the courtyard mouth, slightly cleaner than before, and mind wandering ever so gently toward the temple district and its unique take on dentistry. The temple district looms ahead, its mud brick walls sun-bleached and decorated, with faded offerings, woven garlands, sun symbols painted in crushed ochre, and a few suspicious smears that could be ancient paint or someone's ill-fated lentil stew. You make your way past a pair of temple guards too busy debating whose sandals are better to notice you slip by. You're not here for the gods exactly. You're here for their dentists, or rather for the temple healers who've decided they are also dentists, because in ancient Mesopotamia, healthcare is often just a dice roll with incense and herbal paste. The main courtyard smells strongly of sage, burnt fig leaves, and wet goat. A priestess in long linen robes tends to a fire that is mostly smoke and very little flame. She nods politely at you, not quite smiling, and gestures to a shaded alcove where the temple healer holds court. And there he is, Ur-Nammu, the closest thing Ur has to a dental specialist. His beard is forked. His breath smells like fermented garlic, and his fingernails are permanently stained with something that might be henna or blood. Hard to say. You sit cross-legged on a reed mat as Ur-Nammu grunts in greeting and pokes a clay stylus at his tablet, pretending to read something scholarly. It's probably just a shopping list. Finally, he looks at you. "Tooth pain?" he asks. "Nope," you say. "Missing teeth?" "Still got most of them." He grunts again, disappointed by your relative health. "Then why are you here?" You shrug. "Just making sure everything's still attached." He nods slowly as if this makes sense. He rummages through a wooden box beside him and pulls out a small copper tool. It looks like a spoon that lost a fight. Then, with the delicate grace of a man who once tried to yank a goat's tooth out with a fishhook, he gestures for you to open your mouth. And you do. The inspection begins. He peers in, making thoughtful humming noises. The copper tool pokes gently at your molars. Not much plaque, he mumbles, then pauses, still chewing that resin. Every day. He nods approvingly. Smart. The gods favor those with decent breath. You're not sure if that's in the official hymns, but hey, you'll take the endorsement. Copper tools like this one crude dental picks have been found in burial sites dating back to this era. They're simple but effective, assuming you don't mind occasional bleeding and a very loose interpretation of what sterile means. Historians still debate whether these temple healers were respected professionals or just the brave few willing to stick their hands into someone's mouth. Some tablets reference dental incantations, actual spells meant to soothe toothaches. One begins with "O toothworm who gnaws at the root," which honestly sounds like the start of a fantasy novel you'd probably fall asleep reading. Ur-Nammu finishes his prodding and offers you a reward, a rinse made from warm beer and crushed mint. It's slightly fizzy, a little sour, and tastes like a barley farmer's regrets. But it does leave your mouth feeling oddly refreshed, like you just gargled with bread soup. Keep chewing sticks, he advises. Avoid dates if you can. They glue the teeth together like curses. You nod solemnly, already knowing you'll ignore that advice the next time a vendor offers you sticky date pastries. You thank Ur-Nammu with a small offering, 2 dried figs and a piece of polished shell, and step back into the sun. Your mouth feels both cleaner and slightly violated. Your tongue keeps finding the places where his copper spoon did its worst. But you've survived Mesopotamian dentistry, and for that you deserve a nap. On your way out, you pass a scribe sitting beneath a fig tree practicing cuneiform on a clay tablet. His stylus clicks gently as he scratches out a list of temple donations, barley oil goats, and someone's uncle named Enlil, who was very late paying his tithes. You pause, watching for a moment. The rhythm of the stylus, the lazy flap of linen robes in the breeze, the distant gurgle of a water jar being poured, all of it creates a strange lullaby. You lean against the temple wall for a moment, letting your eyes drift half-closed. You imagine writing a message yourself. Dear future people, our toothbrushes are sticks and our toothpaste is tree snot. Sincerely, everyone. But no one writes that down. Instead, the official record will show barley offerings and celestial omens, nothing about the chewing twigs or Ur-Nammu's warm beer rinse. Still, you know the truth. Hygiene lives in the shadows of history and quiet routines and weird little habits. The wind kicks up gently and you catch a whiff of incense and something slightly burned. Probably someone's midday stew. It smells faintly of lentils and overconfidence. You push away from the wall and start walking again. The day is heating up. Soon it'll be too hot to do much more than sit under an awning and argue about whether the gods like flatbread or round loaves better. But for now, your mouth is clean-ish. Your breath is blessed and your dental destiny has been gently prodded by a copper spoon. Not a bad start for 2000 BCE. You leave the temple district behind, navigating back into the winding streets, where goats wander like they pay rent and children throw pebbles at one another with the solemnity of future scribes in training. Your jaw aches slightly from the copper tool ordeal, and you're vaguely concerned Ur-Nammu dislodged something important, like a memory or your will to chew. Still, the day rolls on, and so do you. By late morning, the market is in full swing. Traders shout over each other, carts creak under the weight of grain sacks, and somewhere nearby a donkey makes a sound that can only be described as deeply personal. You veer toward the northern stalls where the smell of herbs, oils, and yes, strangely sweet ash fills the air. You're on a mission now. See, brushing and resin are all well and good, but for the ambitious Mesopotamian, the true secret to a dazzling or at least not diseased smile, lies in the powders. You duck into a stall that's more apothecary than shop. Shelves of reed baskets and clay jars line the walls, each labeled in smudged cuneiform. Behind the counter is Enna, a woman with an intimidating number of bangles, and a gaze that says she knows exactly how many teeth you have and which one you're not brushing enough. Looking for powder, she asks before you even say a word. You nod. Something minty, or less tree-ish. She grins and pulls out a small jar with a cork top. Crushed myrtle burnt eggshell and a pinch of charcoal. It'll polish your teeth till they blind the sun, or at least until someone compliments you at a feast. You raise an eyebrow. Eggshell, strong like bone, and the gods gave chickens purpose. You take a cautious sniff. Smells like a campfire that had a spa day. Promising. Tooth-cleaning powders like this were sometimes made of ground-up minerals, charred bones, or even pulverized bricks. Yes, bricks. Because why not scrub your mouth with the same thing you build walls? With historians still argue whether these powders were meant more for ritual purification or practical hygiene. It's possible both were true. After all, a clean mouth might make your prayers louder, or at least less offensive to the divine nostrils. You accept the jar and hand over your payment, one decent quality bronze pin and a handful of dried lentils. Enna nods approvingly. Rub it with a damp stick, she instructs. Not too much, unless you want your teeth to sparkle like a river rock. You imagine that for a moment, gleaming, river-polished teeth, and wonder if that's good or just unsettling. Later, in a quieter corner of the market, you sit by a well, the new powder jar, tucked safely into your satchel. You take a moment to observe others as they go about their version of dental care, or lack thereof. A man chews on licorice root, not for sweetness, but for its antiseptic properties. A child absent-mindedly gnaws on a piece of soft reed, mostly because he's teething and the nearest wall was off-limits. There's even an older woman methodically rubbing her gums with a rough cloth soaked in salt water. No resin, no powder, just grit and discipline. She meets your eye and gives a toothless smile. You wave back politely and wonder if she's reached the stage of life where the teeth no longer matter. You pull out your own stick, slightly softened at one end from chewing, and dip it in water, then into the new powder. The mixture clings to the wood in clumps. You hesitate briefly, then begin rubbing it along your molars. It's gritty, chalky. The charcoal brings a deep smokiness, while the myrtle adds an herbal sharpness that stings slightly but in a strangely satisfying way. It's like your mouth has been invited to a campfire ceremony where everyone brought mint leaves and dental opinions. The powder crackles slightly between your teeth, and for a moment, you think maybe the ancients were on to something. Maybe this odd blend of burnt shell and dried herbs really does help. Your mouth feels cleaner. Not minty exactly, but cleaner in a ritually purified by minor suffering kind of way. A passing merchant stops to stare at you mid-rub. Polishing your molars, he asks. Powder from Enna. He nods, impressed. She once made a tooth tonic that cured my brother's hiccups and ruined his marriage. You pause mid-brush, how? Turns out the tonic worked on teeth, but also made him speak only in rhymes for a week. You nod solemnly, tragic. Rhymed his divorce tablet. Impressive. The merchant walks on, whistling. You finish your routine and rinse with a splash of well water. Your mouth tingles, slightly scorched, but strangely renewed. You pop the stick back into your pouch, careful not to jostle the powder jar, and sit back against the stone edge of the well. Above you, the sun is reaching its peak. Shadows shrink, and the heat begins to settle like a lazy god over the city. Somewhere nearby, someone begins to play a reed flute, the melody winding between stalls like a lullaby made of wind. You close your eyes, briefly feeling the grainy edge of your newly cleaned teeth with your tongue. A little sore, a little strange, but definitely not boring. The methods may be rudimentary, but the intent is clear. Keep the teeth and maybe you'll keep the stories. Because in Mesopotamia, where writing was young and toothpaste was brave, oral history and oral hygiene walked hand in hand, sometimes with tree twigs, sometimes with crushed bricks, and always with a touch of audacity. You wander farther from the market now, weaving through narrower alleys where the smell of fish mingles with laundry and hope. The sun presses down on the city like a sleepy cat, heavy and unbothered. Every now and then a small breeze stirs the dust just enough to remind you it's not entirely gone. Ahead you spot a modest courtyard where several elders are seated in a half circle, speaking in low, deliberate tones. You recognize the setup immediately, a mid-morning storytelling session. Not the dramatic epics of gods and kings, those are for the big plazas. This is local gossip that aged into folklore. You inch closer, careful not to interrupt, and slip onto a stone bench. A spry older man with a cane made from twisted palm wood is in the middle of a tale about a boy who swallowed a pebble and claimed it was a healing stone. The laughter that follows is wheezy but sincere. Once the chuckles die down, the topic shifts naturally to body maintenance, joints, digestion, and soon enough teeth. One woman taps her gums proudly. "I only lost 3 teeth this year," she announces. "Youngster," someone snorts. "Try losing all of them before barley season." They all cackle again, and it's hard not to join in. There's something charming about the camaraderie that comes from surviving long enough for your molars to betray you. You listen as they trade tips, most of them questionable. One swears by rubbing garlic on the teeth at dawn. Another insists that breathing through one nostril while chewing prevents decay. A third claims her grandmother swished with goat milk every new moon. None of these methods appear in cuneiform medical tablets, but you wouldn't be surprised if they were tried anyway. In fact, historians still argue whether many Mesopotamian hygiene practices were rooted in practical knowledge, religious belief, or just stubborn trial and error. A young boy, probably a grandchild, runs up and offers a handful of tamarind pods to the group. He's grinning with 2 front teeth conspicuously absent. The elders nod approvingly as he munches one pod, juice dripping down his chin. "That's good for the gums," says the woman beside you. "Tamarind keeps your breath sweet." You raise an eyebrow, even when you've got no teeth. She gives you a look, especially then. You make a mental note, tamarind surprisingly multi-purpose. The conversation turns briefly to curses. Not magical ones, though those do come up, but the everyday curses one shouts when biting into a pebble baked into bread. You're assured that tooth cracking is practically a rite of passage, and that cursing at your food is both traditional and cathartic. The man with the palmwood cane squints at you, you still chewing resin. "Yes," you say, "and I just got a powder from Enna." He nods sagely. "Good woman, honest mouth, bit of a gossip." More than a bit, someone mutters, which sets off another round of laughter. He leans closer and lowers his voice, inviting you into a secret. You want a real tip: roast date pits, grind them fine, mix with water, use it at sunrise. For brushing, for rinsing, feels like sand, tastes like coffee, clears the tongue. You can't tell if this is wisdom or pranking, but the sincerity in his eyes is convincing enough. You thank him and get a small smile in return. Someone starts singing softly, not quite a lullaby, more of a rhythmic chant. It's an old work song, something about carrying water jugs and arguing with donkeys. It fits the moment perfectly. You settle into the stone bench a little deeper, letting your body grow heavier with the warmth and calm. Your eyes flutter briefly, then open again, catching sight of a young girl, mimicking the elders, gently dabbing her teeth with a reed dipped in what looks like flower sap. Her mother laughs quietly, watching her. And just like that, you see how the habits carry on, not through formal instruction or scribal decree, but through observation, imitation, and maybe a few fibs about roasted date pits. Somewhere nearby, a rooster crows a little late. A donkey brays back in protest. A goat decides to headbutt a laundry line, pulling it taut like a harp string before it snaps free. No one bats an eye. You rise slowly, feeling the tug of gravity and storytelling. You bow slightly to the group and thank them for the wisdom, the jokes, and the general ambiance of aged dental lore. Keep those teeth, someone calls after you. They're harder to trade than goats. You grin, waving as you shuffle away, your steps softened by the dust, and a growing sense of connection to people who, despite the centuries, aren't so different from you. They, too, wrestled with bad breath and uncertain powders, with sweet dates and the gamble of chewing. Back on the main path, you pass a mud brick wall with faint carvings, graffiti probably. A child has drawn a bird with big round eyes and something that looks suspiciously like a toothbrush in its beak. You chuckle, wondering if it's an omen, an early advertisement, or just a bored child's dream of dental hygiene. The air smells like dust and distant cooking. Somewhere someone is boiling lentils again, and someone else is probably losing a tooth right on schedule. You've now chewed sap, brushed with powder, debated tamarind's dental merits with elders, and picked up at least 2 home remedies that may or may not work, and yet the adventure continues. You follow the path out toward the city's edge, where the buildings give way to low fields and irrigation ditches. Here, where life slows just enough for the breeze to feel like a decision, there's a cluster of reed huts and workshops. You've come to see the local healers, practitioners of early medicine, and custodians of the tooth gods. Yes, tooth gods. Because in Mesopotamia, even your molars had a prayer list. You arrive at a hut with bundles of herbs hanging from the roof like leafy chandeliers. The air is thick with sage and something mint adjacent but vaguely alarming. A boy sits outside pounding dried seeds with a stone pestle. Inside, an older woman with ink-stained fingers welcomes you with a nod. Her name is Salitu, and she's known around these parts as a asu, a healer, who knows her way around both potions and prayers. She gestures for you to sit and offers you a cup of something murky and steaming. You hesitate, then sip. It's bitter, earthy, and tastes like it holds secrets from a time before time. Not unpleasant, just determined. You've come about teeth, she says, more as a confirmation than a question. You nod, trying to keep mine. Wise, she mutters. People wait too long. By the time they come to me, it's all, my mouth is on fire, or I bit into a godstone. You're not sure what a godstone is, but it sounds crunchy. She begins rummaging through jars, pulling out things with names like night cumin, snake pepper, and fragrant chalk. She sets them aside and begins mixing a new batch of paste, 1 part crushed barley, 1 part honey, and somewhat alarmingly, a few drops of what she calls temple oil. Anointed, she assures you, used in cleansing rituals, and once by a priest who never lost a single tooth. Historians still debate whether Mesopotamian healers practiced medicine closer to science or ceremony. The truth, as always, is likely somewhere in between. Salitu, with her precise measurements and whispered chants, seems to embody both. As she works, she tells you about the toothworm. Yes, the toothworm, a tiny creature that ancient people believed lived inside your gums and caused decay. The theory was that pain came not from rot, but from the worm wiggling around, eating your tooth from within, like a very bad roommate. There's a chant for it, Salitu says, eyes twinkling. Want to hear? You nod. She sings in a low, rhythmic voice. The worm cried for figs, for dates, for honey. The god struck its head. It fled the tooth's cave. She shrugs. It doesn't always work, but it feels good to curse a worm. You smile, imagining generations of people blaming their dental woes on invisible worms and feeling somehow better for having a name for the pain. She finishes the paste and offers you a lump wrapped in palm leaf. Rub this on your gums each night. Spit out what burns. Will it work? She grins. Maybe, maybe not, but the gods are watching and you're trying. That counts. You thank her, tuck the paste into your satchel, and make a small offering in return: 2 polished shells and a scrap of dyed cloth. She accepts it solemnly, nodding toward a small clay idol on a shelf. It's shaped like a lion with a wide open mouth. That's Nintanuga, she says, goddess of healing. She sees all our teeth. You resist the urge to smile awkwardly. It's oddly comforting to think your molars are under divine surveillance. As you step back outside, the sky has shifted to that rich blue of early afternoon. The wind picks up, stirring the reeds like dry applause. You watch as another visitor enters the hut, an older man clutching his jaw, and feel a brief but sincere hope for his outcome. As you walk, you notice reed signs posted near the fields, scribbles that likely advertise Salitu's remedies. Bad breathworm in tooth, we can help. Or maybe they're warnings not to spit near the barley, hard to say. Passing a low wall, you pause to rest and inspect your growing collection. The powder, the paste, the twig. Each item feels like a strange badge of honor, proof of your commitment to something most people only do for 5 minutes a day while checking their reflection. A nearby boy watches you from a tree stump. You a priest. You blink. No. He nods. You've got that look, serious teeth business. You laugh. You could say that. He seems satisfied and starts chewing on a long reed. My uncle says if you smile at the moon, your teeth grow strong. Does it work? He shrugs. He still has all his teeth, but he's also scared of frogs. Another mystery for the ages. You leave the edge of the city with your mouth slightly burning from Salitu's mysterious paste and your mind buzzing with worm chants, moon smiles, and the undeniable truth that in this ancient land of river gods and clay scribes, even your dental care came wrapped in myth and ritual. And as you walk on, you think maybe the toothworm isn't entirely gone. Maybe it's still there, lurking in the collective imagination. Or maybe, like most things in Mesopotamia, it just turned into a story. The heat begins to mellow, now the air settling into a sleepy kind of stillness as you make your way toward the temple quarter. Not one of the grand ziggurats rising like staircases to the gods, but a smaller temple tucked behind a grove of date palms. It's dedicated to Gula, goddess of healing and mercy, patron of the aching body, and yes, the throbbing tooth. You're not here to pray necessarily. You're here to witness something stranger, a ritual that blends oral hygiene with spiritual pleading. Because in this world, even brushing your teeth might require divine intercession. Outside the temple, a priestess stirs a bowl of thick, dark paste, while a group of visitors wait in a slow-moving line. You spot a familiar face, Enna the powder merchant, now barefoot, and carrying a small clay tablet. She gives you a tired smile. Back again, you ask. She lifts the tablet. For my son. Bad gums. I've tried everything else, so now we try prayers. The line inches forward as temple attendants chant softly in Sumerian. You can't quite make out the words, but it has that lullaby cadence, repetitive, sleepy, comforting. Somewhere between a hymn and a hum. You follow Enna inside. The chamber is cool, dark, and perfumed with frankincense. A statue of Gula sits at the far end, serene, regal, holding a dog by the leash, her loyal companion. Dogs, you're reminded, were believed to lick wounds, to promote healing. Some still think they carry divine energy in their slobbery tongues. You look around. Clay tablets and reed scrolls line the shelves, filled with prayers for relief. From everything from head colds to jaw rot. One inscription set into the wall near a basin reads, "O Gula, who restores the gnashing mouth, may my bite be strong as the lion's." You wonder if lions actually had good teeth or if that was just branding. At the front of the room, a priest waves Enna forward. She kneels, presents the tablet, and murmurs a few words before the priest marks her forehead with ash and offers her a small twig dipped in the same dark paste you saw outside. She winces after the first chew. "Clove, you whisper. Licorice root," she hisses, "with some kind of ash." burns like angry sunshine. You try not to laugh. She hands it to her son, who eyes it like it might bite him first. Then dutifully he begins to chew, and everyone lets out the kind of collective breath that says, "Let the gods sort it now." You're invited to make an offering of your own, and though your teeth are currently intact, you figure it can't hurt. You light a cone of incense, whisper a thank you, and leave a smooth river stone beside Gula's feet. One of the attendants smiles. Stones are strong. Good symbol. Historians still argue whether these temple rituals were more placebo than prescription, but you can't deny the effect. The air here feels lighter, less tense. And honestly, if a little prayer gave people peace about their molars, why not? You step out into the courtyard where a second ceremony is starting. This one is more communal, a purification event. A clay bowl is passed around with warm water infused with mint honey and a hint of salt. Everyone takes a sip, swishes it, and spits into a channel lined with reeds. It's oddly beautiful, a shared moment of collective cleansing, part health practice, part emotional reset. A man beside you sighs contentedly, cleans the teeth, calms the heart. You nod. Better than a kick from a goat. He grins slightly. You stay for a while, sitting beneath the shade of the temple's palms, watching people come and go, some limping, some smiling, some carrying small jars of mystery salves. A group of children plays nearby, trying to make bubbles by blowing through reeds dipped in the leftover rinsing bowl. One of them laughs so hard he snorts water out of his nose and starts coughing. His friends all collapse in exaggerated horror. You can't help but smile. Hygiene, it turns out, can be pretty entertaining. A young priestess approaches and offers you a folded bit of papyrus. Inside is a tiny brush made of tightly bundled reed fibers dipped in a blend of resin and mint. "Temple gift," she says softly. "For teeth. For memory. For memory." She nods. Chew slowly and you remember dreams better. You tuck it carefully into your pouch. Not because you believe it necessarily, but because it feels right. As you rise to leave, you glance once more at Gula's statue. The dog at her side almost looks like it's grinning. You whisper a quick thanks just in case the goddess is listening, and because, let's face it, you're a little attached to your enamel now. Out in the fading sun, you follow a quiet canal path, away from temples and back into the rhythms of daily life. The city hums around you with its mix of incense and dust, chewing resin and clove-laced breath. You've learned something important today, not just how Mesopotamians cleaned their teeth, but how they wrapped even the most ordinary acts in layers of story, superstition, community, and care. They didn't brush and rinse because they had to. They did it with songs, rituals, jokes, and gods. And somehow it all worked out, most of the time. The light turns golden as you walk that rich Mesopotamian hour, where everything softens, the bricks glow warm, the canals shimmer like molten bronze, and the marketplace begins to quiet. You duck into a narrow alley, its walls etched with old graffiti, some scrawled in cuneiform, others just crude stick figures with curious hairstyles. One even seems to depict a man wrestling with a very distressed-looking molar. You're here to meet someone unusual. Not a priest, not a merchant, not a healer, a scribe. But not just any scribe, he's part of a small guild that keeps track of civic hygiene protocols. Yes, civic hygiene. Because in the bustling cities of ancient Mesopotamia, where thousands of people lived in close quarters, tooth care wasn't just a personal matter, it had public consequences. You find him hunched over a low-bench stylus dancing across a clay tablet. His name is Nabanu, and his beard is far too magnificent for someone who writes about spit buckets and rinse bowls. "Teeth?" he asks, glancing up. "Still got them," you reply. He smirks. "Then you're ahead of half the scribes in this neighborhood." Nabanu shows you his work, rows of wedge-shaped marks detailing temple distributions of chewing sticks, reports of jaw abscess outbreaks, and fines levied on street vendors caught selling unwashed fruit or dirty pickles. Evidently, oral health was monitored right alongside grain counts and goat traffic. There's even a public rinsing law, he explains, tapping a section of the tablet. Merchants along the main road must offer rinsing bowls to customers. If not 5 shekels, fine, or 10 if someone complains of bad breath. You blink. Enforced. Somewhat. Depends who smells it. You sit beside him as he unfurls a palm fiber map. It shows locations of public hygiene stations, simple clay basins near markets, crossroads, and even next to beer halls. People rinse after drinking, he says. Beer's sweet, bad for teeth. And relationships. You can't argue with that logic. Historians still debate the extent to which Mesopotamian cities had formal sanitation systems versus informal customs. But Nabanu's map suggests at least some intentional structure, like water carriers assigned to refill basins or children paid in nuts to sweep out the spit channels. There's even a small note in the margin: do not let dogs drink from rinse bowls. So what happens if someone skips all this, you ask? Nabanu sighs. Tooth rot, bad breath, shame from their neighbors, and eventually a trip to the barber. The barber. Oh, yes, he says, with a slow, ominous nod. You didn't think dentists existed yet, did you? Your stomach tightens. Barbers did teeth. He chuckles. Not well, but yes. Pulling teeth, lancing boils, draining abscesses. A sharp blade is a sharp blade. You take a long moment to consider that. Maybe resin twigs weren't so bad after all. He tells you stories half grim, half hilarious, about people who delayed treatment for months until their faces puffed up like festival masks. One man, a brewer, allegedly tried to numb his jaw with beer and accidentally passed out during extraction. Woke up with no tooth. Nabanu grins, and no beard. The barber was thorough. As dusk deepens, you follow Nabanu to a small courtyard near the scribal school. There, a group of young apprentices is practicing oral health announcements in Sumerian. One boy stands tall and proclaims, "Clean mouth, clean city." Another chimes in, "Resin is better than rot." A third enthusiastically adds, "Don't let the tooth demon win." You raise an eyebrow. Tooth demon. Nabanu shrugs. Worm demon, same problem. People just want a reason they're in pain. He invites you to sit in on a short reading of an official proclamation from a few decades ago discovered in a buried archive. It reads like a mix of neighborhood bulletin and passive-aggressive complaint. Let it be known that all citizens of who chew sweet reeds without rinsing, and those who spit near the fishmonger's stall, shall offer 1 handful of barley to the temple of Gula, and promise to do better. He folds the clay tablet with reverence. Not every rule sticks, but they tell us what mattered. You lean back, watching the last light drift across the walls. There's something strangely comforting about how even thousands of years ago, people argued over public hygiene, passed down advice with half science and full conviction, and made mildly threatening announcements to get their neighbors to rinse after snacks. You thank Nabanu for his time and for not being a barber and make your way back through the streets now lit with flickering oil lamps. The city sounds change, less shouting, more murmurs. Someone plays a reed flute. Somewhere a dog barks once and is answered by a second dog who clearly has opinions. You pause at a rinsing basin outside a bakery. The water's faintly pink, likely from someone who bit too hard into a date pit. You choose not to contribute to the palate and move along. In the distance, you hear someone chanting the toothworm spell again, maybe a child, maybe an old man too stubborn for temple paste. It echoes faintly through the alleyways, winding like the canals that shape this strange, endlessly inventive city. And as you head toward your lodging for the night, your teeth still intact, your mind lingers on one absurd truth. Mesopotamians may not have had floss, but they had rules, rituals, rinse bowls, and the kind of deeply human desire to keep their breath tolerable. And really, that's something to smile about. The streets hush into stillness, now the kind that makes every sandal step sound too loud. The hum of the city softens to whispers, distant laughter, a door creaking, the swish of a reed broom, brushing yesterday's dust into tomorrow's pile. You make your way toward the outskirts of the residential quarter, drawn by an odd rumor, a wandering herbalist who makes custom tooth powders from riverbank weeds and camel thorn sap. You're not entirely sure what camel thorn is, but it sounds prickly. She's called Ashanatu, and she's not easy to find. Her clinic is really just a woven tent pitched beside a garden where birds flit between fig trees, and the smell of crushed anise drifts lazily on the breeze. She waves you over with resin-stained fingers and offers a stool that might once have been part of a chariot. "You chew?" she asks, holding up a handful of twig shavings that resemble wood shavings from a very confused beaver. "Only recreationally," you reply. She cackles, "Good, I like jokes. Sit." Ashanatu has lived long enough to forget which king is on the throne, but not long enough to forget which weeds fight gum infections. Her shelves are packed with bundles of herbs, some tied with colored threads to ward off spirits. Others are just tossed in bowls and labeled with casual confidence. This one teeth not fall out. She offers you a powder to try. It's chalky, slightly bitter, and surprisingly minty. You cough. She smacks your back. "Not for swallowing. Spit, city boy." You spit discreetly into a clay bowl and ask what's in it. She smiles. Crushed date seeds, dried mint, river salt, a little myrrh, and something secret. "Worm ash." She snorts. "No, lizard tongue, dried." You stare at her. "Kidding," she says, deadpan, mostly. She shows you her mortar blackened from use and begins to grind another batch with rhythmic strokes. "People want white teeth," she muses, "even here. Doesn't matter if your house is mud brick. If your smile is clean, people trust you." It's a sentiment you've heard echoed across ages. Historians still argue whether ancient cosmetic practices in Mesopotamia were status-driven or spiritual, but the emphasis on a clean smile seems to span both. Ashanatu agrees. "I make a special paste for brides," she says. "They chew it for 3 days before marriage. Keeps teeth bright and breath sweet. Very romantic." "What's in that one?" She leans in. "Crushed pearls." You blink. "Tiny ones. From the Gulf. Very rare, very expensive, usually fake." She winks. "But they feel fancy, so who cares?" You ask about men's hygiene. She shrugs. "They chew what their wives give them, or they don't, and I see them 2 months later with cheeks like puffed bread." She lets you sniff a few other concoctions, one that smells like lemony sand, another like rotting fennel. "Don't use that one," she says casually. "It's for enemies." You spend an hour listening to her stories. One client claimed a chewing stick gave him prophetic dreams. Another insisted his teeth whistled after using a certain powder. She once tried to sell a tooth spirit trap made from spider silk and accidentally started a mild panic in the fish market. The truth, she admits, is that oral health in Mesopotamia was often trial and error. People tried things. If their teeth didn't fall out, they shared it. If they did, well, back to the barber. She hands you a small linen pouch tied with a red string. "Traveler's blend," she says, "for chewing, or dreaming, or both." You thank her and ask the price. "Tell people I don't use lizard tongue," she says with a sly grin. "That's payment enough." You walk away lighter somehow, your mouth still tingling with bitter mint residue. It's easy to forget in the grand sweep of ziggurats and empire building that ordinary people like Ashanatu were the ones who actually kept mouths from falling apart. Quiet women in reed huts with ground-up seeds and sharp humor. As you re-enter the city proper, you pass a few kids huddled around something on the ground. You peer closer and realize they're playing a guessing game, blindfolded, chewing different twigs and trying to guess the flavor. One boy proudly announces fig root, and another spits dramatically. "That's goat stick," he cries. A girl nearby nods sagely. Goat stick is good for bad dreams. You pause, wondering whether she meant that seriously, or if goat stick is this era's equivalent of mint chocolate chip. Either way, she seems satisfied. As the sun kisses the horizon, you hear the distant clang of a temple bell. Evening offerings. You take a moment to swirl a bit of water in your mouth, rinse discreetly into a side canal, and smile. Not because your teeth are dazzling, but because you've joined a chain stretching back thousands of years, one twig, one powder, one herbalist at a time. And somewhere out there, probably a Mesopotamian philosopher is writing an ode to the perfect chew. By now, the stars begin to spill across the Mesopotamian night, like flecks of silver paint scattered unevenly over a velvet sky. You find yourself drawn toward the temple district, where oil lamps burn in gentle rows, and the air tastes faintly of incense and baked barley. Your destination this time, the House of Gula, the temple of the goddess of healing. If anyone knew a thing or two about bad teeth and what to do with them, it was Gula's priests. They weren't doctors in the modern sense, but their knowledge was impressive for a time when demons still got blamed for everything, from headaches to hiccups. You step into the temple courtyard where an elderly priestess sits cross-legged on a cushion, gently pounding herbs with a bronze pestle. Her name is Ninella, and she greets you like she's been expecting you since the first Sumerian was born. "Your gums healthy?" she asks without looking up. You pause. Mostly? Good. Sit down anyway." She slides a small clay tablet toward you. It's etched with a series of symbols that look oddly like molars. Some have tiny arrows pointing inward, others are covered with dots. "This is a healing chart," Ninella explains. "We use it to track spiritual blockages. Here she points the front teeth. Those represent truth-telling. Pain here means guilt. The back molars, those are for patience. Pain there means you're holding something in." You nod politely, realizing this might be more metaphysical than dental. Still, you're intrigued. "Many illnesses," she continues, "start in the mouth. The mouth is the gate. What you eat, what you say, what you hold back." She mixes a small bowl of paste, thick, dark, and glistening, and smears it carefully onto a piece of flatbread. "Chew this," she says. Slowly. Think about what you want to release. You chew. The taste is strange, bitter licorice, gritty salt, and a whisper of honey. Not unpleasant, just intense. She begins chanting softly in Sumerian. The words loop and hum like waves on a calm shore. Around you, other acolytes burn herbs, fan the air with palm fronds, and draw spirals in the dirt. It's somewhere between group therapy and a wellness retreat, but with more incense and fewer yoga mats. Historians still argue whether temples like this were actually effective at healing physical ailments, or whether their power lay in ritual and belief. But there's no denying that many Mesopotamians trusted their priests more than their barbers, especially when it came to anything involving bleeding. Ninella leads you to a shrine within the temple. Carved reliefs show people presenting offerings, bundles of herbs, teeth wrapped in linen, small animal figurines. There's even a tiny bronze plaque with a single tooth embedded in it. This one, she explains, was offered after a pain vanished. The man chewed palm resin for 9 days and slept with fig leaves on his cheek. He woke up cured. Or the demon got bored, you think. She shows you a ceremonial tool, a long-handled hook with a sharp curved end. This was used to pull the pain from the mouth, she says. We rarely use it now. Too many complaints. You grimace, I wonder why. People these days, she mutters, no resilience. You sit in the temple for a while longer, letting the murmur of chanting and the smoke of burning tamarisk wrap around you like warm fog. The idea of oral pain being linked to spiritual imbalance feels strangely plausible here. A toothache as confession, a missing molar as absolution. One of the younger acolytes, barely 10 years old, offers you a painted amulet. It's shaped like a little mouth, complete with exaggerated teeth and strung on a reed cord. Protection, he says, from worms and whispers. You thank him and hang it around your neck. It's lopsided but oddly charming. Before you leave, Ninella presses a final paste into your palm. For dreams, she says, chew a pinch before sleep. Keeps the spirits from talking too loud. You step out into the cool night, the city muted under its starry blanket. You can still hear soft prayers echoing through the walls, and for a moment you feel both ancient and brand new. The same way a loose tooth does, unsettling but kind of exciting. As you walk back through the alleys, you pass a man rubbing his jaw with a look of deep betrayal. His friend shrugs and says, "Shouldn't have eaten the old goat." You smile a little smugly and pat your pouch of dream paste. You've had a crash course in Mesopotamian oral care from every angle, sacred, scientific, and somewhere in between. Tonight, your teeth are clean, your breath is herbal, your amulet is on, and your dreams, hopefully, will be free of whispering spirits or hungry toothworms. You wake, or maybe you never quite slept, in a courtyard strewn with the light of an early Mesopotamian dawn. Roosters argue in the distance. Someone's child is already shrieking about flatbread. You stretch your jaw, cautiously working it side to side. No pain, no ominous toothworm dreams. So far, so good. Today's plan is less mystical, more material. You're headed to one of the largest ziggurats in the region, not for prayer, but to visit the scribes. See, it turns out some of the oldest records about teeth aren't carved on temple walls or etched into clay just for ceremony. They're medical case notes, lists, treatment logs, even shopping lists with resin and mint sandwiched between barley and fish. Sumerian dentists, or maybe we should say oral healers, had a certain way with words. You find yourself squinting at a clay tablet no bigger than your hand, impressed with wedge-shaped symbols that took someone half a day to press with a stylus made from a hollow reed. The tablet reads like this: "If a man's tooth loosens, crush wormwood and date fiber. Boil in goat milk, pour on the gum. If pain persists, chant this: tooth be gone, pain be still, worm of rot, leave this hill." A little dramatic, you think. But who are you to judge poetry born under the shadow of empire? The scribe who shows you this tablet is young, scholarly, and constantly brushing dust from his robes with the urgency of someone who loves organization more than people. His name is Lugal-Tenu, and he's very proud of the temple archive. You know, he says, we found over 15 tablets that mention chewing sticks, powders, or gum pain. You nod appreciatively. Some even include patient names. Enkidu, age 32, molar cracked while arguing with his wife. You laugh. He doesn't. We suspect he bit something hard out of spite, Lugal-Tenu offers. He leads you to a shelf that looks like it's been here since mud was invented, then pulls out another tablet. "This one is my favorite," he says. It's a sort of riddle. You read, "The mouth of man holds 30 teeth. Which one speaks, lies, which one keeps secrets?" It's unclear whether the answer was ever written down. Lugal-Tenu shrugs. Maybe it was more of a philosophical exam. Historians still argue whether ancient Mesopotamians categorized dental health in formal terms or treated it simply as part of wider healing rituals. The presence of tablets like this suggests at least some systemization, a Mesopotamian version of patient charts, albeit with more poetic curses. You're shown another tablet with a detailed prescription. To ease tooth pain, crush onion skin, mix with salt, bind in linen, press to jaw at sunrise. That one sounds plausible, even modern, except for the sunrise bit. Though let's be honest, timing your medicine to dawn is way more cinematic than take with food. Lugal-Tenu admits some remedies were, let's say, optimistic. One says to burn the bark of the tamarisk tree, blow the smoke into the mouth, and swallow courage. Swallow courage, you ask. He nods. It's not literal, probably, I hope. You ask about illustrations, he brightens. Ah, come this way. He shows you a clay plaque barely intact that seems to depict a man screaming while a second figure holds something pokey toward his mouth. This is what we think is the earliest depiction of a tooth extraction, he says proudly. Look at the eyebrows. You do. They're very arched. You feel sympathy pains. The plaque also includes a row of small items next to the figure's twigs, bowls, what may be pliers, or perhaps just angry tongs. Beneath them is a tiny inscription, "Be still or the pain will multiply." Dental Motivation c. 2000 BCE. Your time with the scribes ends when Lugal-Tenu realizes he's late for recopying a hymn about irrigation canals. He sends you off with a hand-drawn copy of the tooth riddle and an apologetic smile. It's not exactly medicine, he says, but maybe it'll keep your teeth thoughtful. You step back into the sunlight with the clay under your arm, feeling like a time-traveling patient who just got handed their dental records from 4,000 years ago. As you head through the marketplace, you notice a stall where someone's selling tooth powder in little clay jars. Sumerian sparkle, the vendor calls out. Make your smile shine like the moon over Uruk. You ask what's in it. Ground bone, mint, a touch of ash, and prestige, he replies. Prestige. He winks. Very expensive. You pass on the powder, but you do pick up a tiny bronze scoop designed to remove particles stuck between your teeth. It's oddly satisfying. The vendor throws in a second one for free. For your second favorite molar, he says. Your satchel is getting heavy with chew sticks, amulets, herbal pastes, scribal riddles, and now dental accessories. You're not just a traveler anymore. You're a walking Mesopotamian hygiene kit. You find a shaded bench beneath a date palm and sit to rest, flossing idly with a stiff reed. Children run past one yelling that her baby brother has swallowed a pebble and now he'll grow teeth in his belly. A grandmother nearby chuckles. At least they'll be clean, she says. You close your eyes and lean back, listening to the sounds of a city that never had toothpaste, never invented braces, and yet somehow managed to keep its smiles going for millennia, with Twigs' belief and a little bit of ash. The late afternoon sun slinks across the rooftops like a lazy cat, stretching shadows through the marketplace. You rise from your bench reed, still between your teeth like some kind of time-traveling cowboy, and decide it's time for one more stop tonight. You've got a dinner invitation, but not just any dinner. You're headed to a wealthier household, one that boasts both a garden and a private cook. This means two things. One, you'll be fed something you can't identify but will probably like. And two, you'll get a glimpse into what rich Mesopotamians did to keep their teeth intact through decades of eating. Well, things that aren't soup. You're greeted at the threshold by a servant with hands stained green from pounding herbs. He leads you through an open courtyard shaded by reeds, where vines grow along the walls and doves coo from their cages. Inside, the master of the house, an older man with deep lines in his face and a mouth full of shockingly intact teeth, welcomes you with a clap on the shoulder. His name is Sin, and he's got the kind of voice that implies he's been chewing on gravel since childhood. He gestures toward the meal being laid out: lentil stew, roasted lamb, cucumber slices floating in vinegar, fresh figs, and a steaming dish of something unidentifiable that jiggles when you poke it. Try everything he says, except the eel cakes. My cousin made those. As you chew carefully, you ask him how he's kept his teeth so well. Discipline, he says, pointing a finger, and superstition. You raise an eyebrow. I never sleep without rubbing my gums with myrrh, he explains. Never eat anything until I've sniffed it for rot, and I never ever argue with someone who sells fish. You ask why. Bad breath, bad energy, he says, completely serious. As dessert arrives, some sort of date paste ball dusted with crushed almonds, you notice a small tray being passed around. On it, Twigs' tiny brushes made from palm fibers and what looks like flavored chewing bark. This, apparently, is the post-meal ritual. Ibisin takes a stick, chews the end until it frays, and begins delicately scrubbing at his molars. You don't want your food clinging to your teeth like a tax collector, he warns. He offers you one sandalwood scented you accept. Around the table, everyone's doing the same, methodically rubbing their teeth. Clean some humming little tunes while they do it. A girl no older than 8 boasts that her chew stick is sharpened by the gods. Her brother rolls his eyes so hard, you're surprised his head doesn't spin. Historians still debate how widespread this sort of oral care was among non-elites. While wealthier families clearly had access to better materials and more time to obsess over rituals, chew sticks and herbal powders show up in graves of farmers and fishermen too. So maybe good dental habits weren't just for the fancy. The household cook, who insists you call her mistress of spices, joins you with a small dish in hand. It's filled with a gritty pink paste. This, she says proudly, is my family's gum salve. 3 generations. Keeps your breath sweet and your enemies jealous. You sniff it minty with something sharp underneath, pomegranate rind, maybe. Massage it into your gums, she instructs. Not too much unless you want your tongue to tingle for an hour. You comply. The sensation is strange, but not unpleasant, cooling, then slightly numb, like your mouth is trying to take a nap before the rest of your body. As the sun dips behind the ziggurat skyline, the household begins its winding down. The oldest grandmother pulls a soft cloth over her head and mutters a blessing to Gula. The kids are sent to rinse their mouths with river water, carried in jugs wrapped in palm rope. You're invited to stay the night, and you accept. They set up a sleeping mat in a corner room, still faintly warm from the afternoon sun. A small bowl of dried twigs and a folded cloth sit beside it, your tooth kit courtesy of the house. Lying back, you stare up at a ceiling decorated with painted stars and quietly marvel at how even in a world without fluoride mouthwash or electric toothbrushes, people still did their best to care for the parts of them that mattered most when talking, smiling, or chewing eel cake. You drift off with a clean mouth and the scent of sandalwood still tingling in your nose. Morning returns with the sound of sweeping. Somewhere nearby, a broom of bound reeds brushes the dust from a stone floor with the enthusiasm of someone who either really loves cleaning or is trying to bury yesterday. You rise, slowly stretching limbs and jaw alike, and savor the minty ghost of last night's gum salve, still lingering on your breath. Your host, Ibisin, has already begun his day, perched in the courtyard, sipping something hot and murky. Clove water, he explains, keeps the gums strong, or so my grandmother claimed, and she had all her teeth when she died at 92. One of them even came loose in the tomb and rolled out like a marble. You nod politely, ignoring the mental image. Today's destination takes you away from the comforts of elite courtyards and down toward the edge of the city, the docks. It's where the fisherfolk and river traders live, where mouths are often full of fish bones and opinions, and where dental care takes a turn for the inventive. You pass market stalls hawking everything from clay figurines to dried lizard skin for luck, allegedly. Children dart through puddles barefoot and grinning wide, many of them with chipped teeth and bark chewed down to the fibers. At the river's edge, you find a cluster of boats being unloaded. A wiry woman with the sun-darkened skin of 1,000 sunrises calls out, waving you over, looking for toothfish. You blink. Toothfish. She laughs. No, but it got your attention. Her name is Zalali, and she's something of a dockside legend. Not a healer, not quite a merchant, just a woman who knows how to fix things, including your smile. She beckons you to a crate by the water where she keeps what she calls her river remedies. Inside, blackened twigs, dried herbs wrapped in twine, a sharp flake of obsidian, and what looks suspiciously like a necklace made of teeth. Not human, she assures you, seeing your face. Goat. She selects a twig and hands it to you. This one's tamarisk. Tastes like regret, but it scrubs like a miracle. You chew and immediately feel the bitterness spread through your mouth like liquid sarcasm. But she's not wrong, it cleans your teeth with a surprising thoroughness, almost sandpapery. Doc folks don't have time for fancy powders, she says. We chew, we rinse with river mint, and we spit westward. That last part's just tradition. You ask about tooth pain. She points to a small pouch. Crushed oyster shell and beer mash. Pack it on the aching side and drink something cold. Historians still argue whether these dockside traditions were rooted in true medical knowledge or just pragmatic experimentation, but archaeological evidence does show traces of mineral mixtures and herbal poultices on jawbones, suggesting that even the humblest citizens had strategies for coping with oral agony. You watch as a boy, no older than 10 cracks, open a fish, pulls something from its belly and hands it to Zilali. Catfish stone, she says. Found one once that had a pearl inside. Thought it was an omen. Turns out it was a marble someone dropped upstream. Still, she keeps the stone. Good for placing on sore teeth, just don't bite it. You meet an old boatman who, despite missing half his teeth, insists he never had pain. Lost 'em young, he says with a grin. Now I just suck the fish clean. Zilali claps him on the back. He's the fastest eel deboner in town. Doesn't even need teeth. The rest of the morning passes in a haze of river smells and dockside philosophy. You sample a salt-dried root that tastes like fennel, and regret and a tiny bead you're told to roll between your gums until you feel your sins lift. A nearby fisherman, bored or inspired, begins carving his own chew stick, whittling it into the shape of a fish before biting into it with pride. Even here, far from temples and scribes, people treat their mouths like shrines. Not because they're sacred, but because they're essential. You can't trade, argue, flirt, or sing without a functioning jaw. As you prepare to leave, Zilali presses a small sachet into your hand. For later, she says, when your mouth misses Mesopotamia, it smells faintly of clove bark and the kind of wisdom you only get from scraping your tongue with a twig shaped like a fish. You thank her and make your way back through the city, your mouth tingling from resin mint and possibly the early stages of spiritual enlightenment. It's hard to say, but you do feel strangely fresher, lighter, like you've brushed your soul just a little. Back in the heart of the city, the sun reaches its sleepy golden hour. You wander through a quieter district now, less shouting, more sweeping, fewer fish guts, more perfumed oil. It seems you've stumbled into the quarter of the scribes' priests and assorted thinkers who spend more time ink-stained than sunburned. Here the air smells of parchment lamp soot and the ever-present whiff of cedar oil, Mesopotamia's answer to both perfume and mosquito repellent. You follow the scent to a small building with a faded carving above the door, a man, a scroll, and what suspiciously resembles a toothbrush. Inside, an elderly priest sits cross-legged beside a wax tablet, carefully etching cuneiform symbols with a stylus carved from bone. Without looking up, he mutters, "You're late for your oral hygiene tutorial." You smile. He doesn't. "I'm joking," he says at last, but only slightly. He introduces himself as Shulgi Adapa, scribe of temple records and part-time dental enthusiast. Not official, he clarifies. But my brother was a dentist, or the closest thing to one. He once pulled a bad tooth from a bull with a hook and prayer. You sit beside him on a woven mat. He offers you a date stuffed with walnuts, then immediately instructs you to chew only on the left side. The right side is for future problems, he says, mysteriously. Shulgi Adapa begins describing the more scholarly aspects of oral care in ancient Mesopotamia. You know about the demons? Yes. You blink, not the direction you expected. Toothaches were caused by the toothworm, he explains. Invisible, of course, but very real. It gnawed from the inside. You nod slowly. There's a Sumerian incantation, he continues, voice lowering to a chant. After Anu created the heavens, the toothworm wept for a home. The solution, a mouthful of beer and ashes, plus a good yell. Historians still argue whether this infamous toothworm was purely metaphorical or rooted in real observations, tiny wriggling nerves mistaken for invaders. Either way, it led to some fascinating blends of science and superstition. He shows you a clay tablet covered in tiny wedge-shaped writing. Instructions, he says, for preparing tooth powder. Burned barley flour, powdered charcoal, mint, if you're lucky. He reaches behind him and brings out a small ceramic jar. Still make it, he whispers, but I add ground rose petals. More romantic. You're invited to try it. The powder is gritty and smoky, like brushing your teeth with campfire ash and a hint of garden party. Your gums tingle again, probably in protest. Clean teeth, clean conscience, he says. Also, fewer prayers for divine molar mercy. You ask him if priests ever performed dental procedures. He nods gravely. When needed, we had knives, hooks, chants. Sometimes all three at once. He pauses, then adds, and wine, always wine. The conversation drifts into scribal gossip. Who cracked a molar on a poorly baked clay tablet, who tried to whiten their teeth with crushed pearls and ended up looking haunted. You ask if anyone ever faked having a toothache to get out of work. Constantly, he says. We had one man who claimed the worm moved from tooth to tooth each week, said it was chasing something. You laugh. He doesn't. Joking or not, it's clear that oral care here wasn't just a matter of physical health. It was tied to spiritual purity, ritual cleanliness, and social standing. A clean mouth wasn't just polite. It was pious. Before you leave, Shulgi Adapa hands you a tiny scroll wrapped in linen, a charm, he says, for peaceful dreams and strong enamel. You step outside, back into the amber glow of evening. The sounds of the city soften, the hammering slows, the arguing fades to murmurs, and someone begins plucking a lyre just out of view. You realize that for all the tools, herbs, and rituals you've encountered, the most powerful aspect of ancient dental care might have been the care itself. The simple act of paying attention to one's body, however primitive the methods, because in a world full of unpredictable gods, hungry rivers, and sandy winds that found their way into every crevice, your own mouth was at least one domain where you could assert some order. You chew one last twig as you wander back toward the edge of town, past glowing windows and whispered prayers. And for the first time in this dusty, sun-baked world, your smile feels right at home. The night in Mesopotamia unfolds like a velvet scroll, soft, deliberate, marked by stars and low, flickering lamplight. You find yourself walking once more toward the ziggurat, that ever-watchful staircase to the gods, silhouetted now against a cobalt sky dusted with constellations. The ancients gave wildly romantic names to the plow, the goatfish, and somewhere above you, the roaring toothworm. Okay, that one might be unofficial. You've seen the rich and the poor, the priests and the fisherfolk, all bound by the same ancient preoccupation, teeth, or more precisely keeping them intact despite a world built on dried dates, gritty bread, and a near-total lack of dental insurance. Your final stop is the temple kitchen, surprisingly still active this late in the evening. A few sleepy acolytes prepare food for a midnight offering. Here, amidst simmering pots and steaming flatbread, you meet your last informant, a middle-aged cook named Tarsa, who has the look of someone who's bitten into every type of grain the Fertile Crescent has ever grown. Let me guess, she says, handing you a cup of warm barley milk. You want to know how to floss with a chicken feather. You blink. Relax. It was a joke, sort of. Tarsa has her own views on oral care, less magical, more practical. It's all in the bread, she says. Stone ground flour. Grit in every bite. You clean your teeth by scraping off enamel whether you like it or not. She tears off a piece of bread and holds it up to the lamplight. See that sparkle quartz? Dinner comes with exfoliation, and she's not exaggerating. Archaeologists have long noted that Mesopotamian teeth wore down dramatically with age. thanks largely to microscopic stones in daily bread. Some jaws show more erosion than a desert canyon. You chew this stuff every day, she says, and eventually your molars look like river pebbles. She explains that cooks would sometimes try to sift their flour better or mix in oil to soften the bite. But food was food. If it kept you alive, it didn't need to pamper your gums. To soothe sore mouths, she had her own tricks, a paste of honey salt and crushed fennel seeds. Tastes like punishment, but it works. She grins. Historians still debate whether culinary professionals like Tarsa knowingly shaped dental health, or if their decisions were just a lucky or unlucky byproduct of survival. You want healthy teeth, she says. Talk less, chew slow, and never insult a baker. You help her stir a pot of lentils, the steam rising gently infused with coriander and garlic. Around you, the clatter of clay bowls slows. The fire burns low. The city hums its final notes of the day. Tarsa offers you a final parting gift, a slender stalk of anise already chewed a bit. Good for after meals, she says, or when you've got nothing to say but still want to look busy. You tuck it behind your ear, half out of thanks, half out of fashion. Wandering now through the quiet alleys, you feel the pulse of the place fade into silence. Your teeth, oddly enough, feel cleaner than they have in ages, polished not just by twigs and ash, but by stories, by rituals, by the oddly charming obsession of an entire civilization. You remember the temple boy's resin gum, the dockside mint rinse, the priest's powdery potion, and Zilali's goat tooth necklace. Every tooth in Mesopotamia, it seems, had a tale to tell. And though none of these methods would pass a modern dentist's approval, most would be filed under do not attempt without supervision. There's something oddly comforting in the effort. They tried. They cared. Even without fluoride or floss, they paid attention to their mouths. Because the mouth wasn't just for food. It was for prayer, for music, for declarations of love and anger and fish prices. It was a sacred gateway and also a bit of a mess. But isn't that the human condition, holy and hilarious all at once? And so as you curl up beneath a roof of reed and stars, the wind carrying a faint trace of frankincense and baked clay, you think of your ancient Mesopotamian counterparts, cleaning their teeth with twigs, whispering charms to ward off invisible worms, and going to bed with the lingering taste of clove and barley ash. Not because they had to, but because it helped them feel a little better, a little cleaner, a little more in control of their unpredictable mud brick world. And now, the fires have gone out now. Even the dogs in the alleyways have stopped their murmuring. The city sleeps. You lie on a mat woven from river reeds, the kind that creaks softly with every exhale. The air is still but warm, not stifling. It wraps around you like a worn linen robe, comforting in its simplicity. Above you, the stars shift lazily across the sky, just as they did 5,000 years ago. The constellations are quieter now, their stories whispered rather than proclaimed. Somewhere maybe the toothworm curls up to sleep, too defeated for the night by powdered fennel and priestly poetry.